Hey guys, Phil Cutting back here to help you choose what's the best development path moving forward. And I just want to help point out a few differences and give you some information to help this conversation easier or to help you make the choice on your own. So, if we're looking at making a web or mobile app, we have a few options. We can have native apps, we can have cross platform apps, also called hybrid apps. We can have web apps that works on the browser and is still a program, but is not made to work on any particular phone. It works anywhere there's a browser. And then there's progressive web apps that you can make. They're based off web technology. You can install them on, you can wrap them and install them on devices just like regular apps, but you can also work with them in browsers in many cases. So those are the four major categories. And I want to talk about each one of these a little bit so that you can understand some real world examples and how your app might be best served by choosing one of these development paths. And some of the big ones for native apps is Pokemon Go and Instagram. And the reason we're looking at probably the reason they chose these are the benefits for using native apps is they have high performance. They're very responsive. And normally you find a lot of games built on these environments. But also, if you need to get closer to the hardware, if you need to have the best speed with the least delay and have full access, or as much as the operating system will allow you to have full access to the devices, the components of your phone, such as location or notifications or storage, or online offline capabilities, right? There's nothing better than this native app. The cons but are also kind of as many, right? So while you have this perfect code, right, for that particular device, you also have now two sets of code that you have to maintain. For example, your Android software and your iOS program. So they're both two different sets of code. It adds cost and complexity and also adds time a lot of the times to do it. And a little thing that's kind of hard to say if it's a con or not is that you're also going to have a very different server environment. So you can't tie the technologies together as smoothly into, for example, JavaScript like you could on some cross-platform apps. We'll talk more about that later. Instagram utilizes device-specific features like camera and location services for photo sharing and geotagging, but the biggest part of it is the performance on those devices. And Instagram is certainly a big enough company with enough investments where they can afford to create those native solutions where the user experience is the biggest thing that matters. Web apps are a way that you can make a app that somebody doesn't have to install on their particular device. Some examples of this are React, or Angular, Vue.js, to name just a few. The New York Times is built on React, and GitHub, the web component, is built on Angular. These systems are able to use essentially the browser's features to present information, to make it easy to access, to review and see, while they also have web APIs where they can deliver content and pull content in ways that make it so that other apps can integrate into it. But they have most of their heavy lifting work done on their servers, and they're presenting some information or storing, or, like in the example of New York Times, they're delivering the content in a way that's easy for you to read. It's for them, they felt they could do this well on just a web browser in itself. So it's the simplest solution for these guys, with a lot of the pros being that it's ideal for content-based platforms, just like news, websites, and blogs, where the cross-form capabilities are going to make it easy for them to develop the apps, to make it easy to do updates, where they don't have to worry about having so much nuance complexity. And when they want to make a change, they can quickly make one change, and it's going to cover more users than it would if you're going to native. Some limits are that you have limited access to device features, which might hinder your performance for certain interactive applications like games or augmented reality. And also, you have limited offline capabilities. Now, hybrid apps, we're looking at apps that you write one set of code and they're going to work on both iOS and Android platforms. So, and the big players in here: Ionic, Flutter, React Native, right? And some examples of there out there are the Weather Channel with built with Ionic, and Alibaba built with Flutter. So they're able to present information in a way that is convenient on mobile apps with enough functionality that's close enough to the hardware to give a better experience than you would with web. You also have offline capabilities, storage, and often access to a lot of the components, even if there's a little bit of delay when new features are released by the operating systems. They generally largely are able to catch up within a reasonable enough time. And if you're not needing that high game performance level of interaction and convenience for the client, hybrid app is a great way to save money, to speed up the development, and to simplify your entire life as a app owner. And it's really come a long ways in the past. In 2024, 2023, it really started stepping up. 2024 is continuing to impress. The cons is that performance might not match that of native apps, and there's going to be potentially some impact on user experience, especially in resource-intensive applications. And if you want to have some features that are restricted on hybrid platforms, then it's sometimes better to go to the native environments. Even that said, this is kind of changing lately with React Native, allowing you to develop some core functionality for the native environments. And also Flutter has really made some impressive gains recently, where they also allow you to break out parts of the code, or all of it if you want, into specific iOS or Android components. And while there is some arguments on the value of that to the platform, there is a lot of potential to it in power. Still, there's some of the costs, like not having as great user experience, not being totally native, and that if you're going to create this kind of complexity in the app in code base anyways, maybe it's better just to go native in the first place. Progressive web apps are an exciting category for me. I think they are going to evolve into a place that's going to easily take over cross-platform apps, but potentially they can really take over where you see native apps in a lot of cases. So the challenge here is that while there is access to a lot of stuff on the phone, like camera, like location, even offline capabilities, that there's a bit of a conflict between what you can really get done and what in the feature set that you're able to access without having to invest a lot of money into pre-built and professional libraries. So the support on this, I think, is still a little bit low, and I'm real excited to see where progressive web apps come in the future. But for some real-world examples, Twitter Lite offers a fast and responsive mobile experience with offline functionality, and Starbucks progressive web app allows customers to order and pay for drinks offline and enhances convenience and accessibility, especially in areas with spotty and internet connectivity. And there's also the ability to create a experience that is very familiar across the browser, across the platform, the iOS, the iPhones, right? That's makes it comfortable for your user base. Now, there are some cons to this, largely like there's limited support, especially on older browsers. There can be some problems getting these apps accepted on the app stores and play stores, especially if you don't develop them in a way that's really intended to be a mobile experience. I've seen Apple really turn down a lot of apps and make them go back and redesign the app specifically to be more convenient on the iPhones and iPad experience. So just know that you can't just take any kind of progressive web app and that you're going to be able to get those on the stores. You're going to have to really put some consideration into it to make sure it's a really appropriate user experience. And it used to be the case where, we could get a web app kind of through the door, but it's becoming less and less, especially with AI reviews of those apps, and they're largely getting called out a lot sooner. So while there's still a lot of them on the marketplace and there's still some coming, it can be a challenge. So make sure you plan ahead for that and don't think you're just going to wrap it. Oh, and by wrap it, I mean take a regular web page, add some components, add the job managers so that it can run like a mobile app versus running as a browser app, and that you are planning the user experience in a way that's going to make it like a mobile experience. Okay, so check this out. There's I want to show you this chart. There's a rating on the left side here. We have ratings from 1 to 10, and this is a comparison of the advantages and weaknesses of using native apps, web apps, hybrid apps, and progressive web apps. So for performance, there is nothing better than native. And at the bottom of that list comes web apps. The cost for categories, I believe, so for me, progressive web apps are a little bit more expensive than web apps, but not so much more that you'd be really concerned about it. The biggest concern with progressive web apps is making sure that they get accepted on the app stores if that's what your goal is. If you're looking to keep it in the browser, there's a lot of benefits to them. Here's some considerations. For me, still in 2024, progressive web apps are good in business experiences where there is some more control over the hardware and the experience that the user is going to have. There's still a lot of complaints about the user experiences for many progressive web apps from consumer expectations, because they are still expecting to have that high-end mobile native environment, and they're generally getting something like a restricted browser experience, and the hardware that they can be put on is so broad, right? This is an advantage and a weakness at the same time. It's so broad that you can get a lot of bad reviews for people using it on hardware that it was really never intended for. And of course, on cost categories, the most expensive is native apps. And as far as time to market, progressive web apps could really be it, unless you start having trouble getting it through the app store. It all depends on how you plan it ahead of time. For me, web apps is the best development to market, because, and here's why. There's a big caveat on this also. It's hard sometimes to get users to install mobile apps. So if you're looking to reduce that tension, that resistance, you can start with a web app. And then as you get your MVP up and solidified and have your back end tested, you can create the native or cross-platform apps that are going to get that better user experiences. Take a little bit longer to get those products out, or start building them in a way that, depending on the tolerance of your audience and how quickly you can solve the key problem, you can sometimes build that anticipation, build that fan base, and get a easier acceptance going from web app to initiate your community, and then enhancing it with mobile apps. That's a big discussion. You got to think about what your strategy to market is. Okay, so just to give some reviews on this. So for native apps, for performance, we're going to put that as a 9. Pros are superior performance, direct access to device features, high user engagement due to platform-specific optimizations and designs. Cons are that it requires separate development of each platform, increasing complexity, cost, and how long it takes to get to the market. For web apps, I'm going to give that a 6. Pros are accessibility from any device with a browser, ease of updates, and lower development cost. Cons are limited to performance and access to device features, generally slower and less interactive. and not so performant for batteries. Hybrid apps come for performance at number 7, and the big benefit is the single code base for multiple platforms, faster development time, and moderate performance improvements compared to web apps, and to offline access, and to the general user experience that you can provide. Cons: still lower performance compared to native apps, and limited access to device features with potential UX issues, while that's coming less and less of an issue nowadays. And I think finally, like, the big con for me in this case might be that you have to be considerate if your users are going to be accepting of slower releases to features as they come out, right? So here's the thing with hybrid apps, cross platform apps. Generally, they have a little bit of a lag when the new features are delivered, and they also suffer from more frequent depreciation in code bases and having to update them more often. Though this makes sense because every time that either Android or iOS makes an update to their platforms, the hybrid environment has to keep up also. So you're going to feel like you're doing a lot of code updates to prevent depreciation. In this case, progressive web apps, I give it a 8. Even though I want to put some stipulations that you got to make sure it's a good match fit for what you're trying to use. Near native experience with good performance, works offline, and is accessible via browsers without needing installation. Also, you can install, getting better better visibility on app stores to both worlds. Cons are that it's limited access to some of the device features and varying performance across devices. So you really got to be careful what your end user can put this on, because they can put it on some crazy devices that you never thought would really make sense, and you have to support that in a lot of cases, or at least deal with some nagging customers. Let's see. So under costs, I'm going to give native apps a 5. And this is because it's a high cost due to the need for separate development teams for each platform, and overall higher maintenance costs with longer development times, because you're solving problems specifically for each environment, and you're going to have a reasonable access to all those talents, generally separate people for iOS, generally separate people for Android, generally separate people for web browser. So under costs, web apps and progressive web apps come close together. I'm going to give progressive web apps just a little better lead over web apps itself, because for progressive web apps, you have the most cost efficient as it uses a single code base, and it gives you more value by being able to install on the app stores for iOS and for Android. Though there is other cost that comes to this when it's associated with making sure that you design well for those environments. So this can be quickly lost. And there is the most volatility for me when it comes to being able to make sure that you're delivering a great user experience, and that the hardware that you're going to be using is going to be able to support this. And the last thing is that I've noticed this, at least in 23, 24, that to get access to the really good libraries, they're mostly pay to use. So the community out there isn't so aggressive as it is with web apps and hybrid apps. So you can quickly lose that cost advantage depending on your use case. Web apps, of course, you have browsers. You can use it on any browser generally. You have quick deployments. You can do it in JavaScript, for example, and that means you can have similar languages when you're building your app and when you're building your servers, if you're going to use Node for your servers. And the environment is fairly stable with not as frequent updates as we're experiencing both the progressive web app world and in the hybrid app world. So, under cost, hybrid apps are going to come in just above native apps as they are more cost effective than native apps because of the single code base, but potentially higher than web apps due to the need for native wrappers and plugins. For time to market, I'm going to say that native web apps are generally the longest lead time from concept to market. This might be this. There is times when this isn't totally true, and that has to do with how easy it is to integrate it with the native components, with the audio players, with the media players, and the video. So sometimes if you're using certain edge cases, it's faster and better to go with native web apps. Web apps, these are going to be almost the best flow to market because it's real fast market time for development because of single code base and ease of development and the large amount of developers out there that understand how to work with web apps. With progressive web apps being just better than this, as long as the use case makes sense, then this is going to be a great fit. Because you have generally close access to the device, you have offline access, and this is on most of the time you're looking at the fastest time to market due to leveraging web technologies and the single code base allowing you to do the quick updates and deployments. And generally, hybrid apps are going to be right there in the middle of all of these four, better than native apps, but not as amazing as web and progressive apps due to quicker development compared to native apps, but slower than web apps and progressive web apps due to the additional complexity of integrating native elements. So the expectation is that the native app provides better user experience than does the progressive web apps when there's more technical complexity, but the best experience is going to be native apps. But considering that it can be more expensive to get it out there with native apps, of course. So native apps are going to excel in performance, but are costlier and have longer development times. Web apps are cost effective and quick to market, but have lower performance. Hybrid apps offer a middle ground with moderate performance and cost and fairly quick time to market times. And progressive web apps, when they fit the model case, provide a balanced approach with good performance, low cost, and the fastest time to market, making them a versatile solution as long as they are a great fit. There are some outliers in these concepts, so you kind of have to know a little bit more about it. But if these fall generally into the categories that we discussed and you're able to set your priorities, it's going to help you figure out which direction to go in. And we've had some interesting trends in 2018 through 2023. Now we have projections for 2024, and I'm going to kind of state my experience on that, but it's July, so who knows where it'll settle towards the end of the year. And what I'm seeing is the trends for native apps have risen from 20% in 2018 and is reaching around 35% by the end of 2023. And this is driven by their superior performance and user experience and having full access to device features. And I think it's also where a lot of mature products go as they grow out of the MVP stage and you're looking to create a better user experience. Not always a great place to start for native apps, but it tends to be where you go if you need performance. Now, if you like with the news and with content delivery, you're looking for something else, right? And that's probably cost effectiveness, how quick you can make updates across platforms, and then really focus on your content rather than the experience of the app. There's the balance on that. Check out if you want to check out some more stats on this, if this is kind of fun for you, check out Statista, and you can also read through maybe Mobile App Daily. So for web trends, we're looking at usage rates consistently going from 15% in 2018 to around 25% last year. And this appeal lies in the cost effectiveness, ease of updates, and accessibility across all devices with a browser. Also, lately in 2024, and towards the end of 2023, I was finding that many clients were having a harder time getting people to install apps on devices and keeping them on there in use. So it's a good strategy to consider using a web app to help build that audience and that engagement, and then continually driving people back to the mobile app. On this one, chicken or egg, which comes first, is hard to say. Hybrid apps went from around 10% in 2018 to approximately 20% in 2023. I would say that in 2024, we're going to see the biggest growth in the sector being in hybrid apps. Now, I know that progressive web apps in 2024 really want to do some amazing stuff, and there's a big drive for it. But I think there's been some pullback to those based off of how difficult it is sometimes for them to get into the app stores. And that if they're going to create that kind of quality experience in the first place, then they may want to go with a cross-platform app anyways. Hybrid app anyways. And the trends for progressive web apps was like 0% in 2018. And they say to 20% in 2023. That they are really coming a long ways in offering offline experiences, cost-effective development, and really some great performance because of the maturity of browsers and the technologies in this days. And in the future, I don't know if it's going to be 2024 or 2025, but I think in the future, we're really going to see a lot of growth in the progressive web app industry as long as it can get some momentum and the user base is behind it. Right now, it's a little ways off, but it's definitely the way of the future. So in summary, we have native apps that are best performance and user engagement, but more costly and often more time consuming to development. Unless you run into some problems, and if you run into some complexities that are pushing it a little bit too far for web apps and hybrid apps, you can realize that you've saved some time. But you never realize this until you do it and you hit those walls, or you have the experience to know that, hey, this is something I shouldn't have tried to do on a progressive web app or a hybrid app. Web apps are cost-effective, quick to deploy, but limited in performance and device features access. While that is fairly expanding, you can have camera in general, you can have location when you're given permission. And all these systems, you have to get permission anyways, right? So, but you do get better and more effective use of these features on native and hybrid apps than you will on web apps. Progressive web apps, they're saying that you're going to get these core features with the ability to function just as it would on a native app. I'm still waiting to see how that is. From what I saw 2023, early 2024, the promise is a little bigger than what's getting delivered. Okay, so a little fun. Let's take a look at the market analysis. Now, before choosing the path, it's critical to conduct comprehensive market analysis and see what others are doing, why they're doing it. Take a look at why people are choosing certain platforms, and if your options lie in rest with what they're doing, that's maybe a good indicator. Maybe it means you're not innovating enough. Maybe it's time to move on, right? So don't be afraid if what you're trying to do is different than what the market is. Just make sure you see why they're doing it and see how people are responding. Look at the complaints in the user experience and see if it's a satisfying experience or if it's going to be an enhanced experience. And make sure it's profitable, right? So evaluating the market share for different iOSs. And so it's going to be specific to each industry, right? iOS holds 20% of the global market share, while Android dominates with 71%. But look at how the ad spend on platforms. In America, the largest part of spend is on Android. It's on iOS, right? But even in America, it's tending to be the Android is having more user time, but it's slightly different culture. And you have to look at user experiences. You want to consider what the preferences are and the demographics for your target audience. An example is here in America, younger demographics might prefer mobile apps, while older users may prefer web-based solutions. And you also have to look at other things like will this demographic or this market segment be more inclined to install for this kind of app versus other kinds of apps. And you want to make sure you complete a comprehensive analysis of your competitors' development paths and their decisions and success in the market. For example, competitor X here might be achieve significant user growth after launching a native mobile app, and see if they're in your if competitors are gaining market share by going to native apps, or are they putting in large investments and not gaining market share? Would that be better money spent in creating content or enhancing the existing experience, or perhaps in marketing? And this graphic is kind of a great one for you guys to see. We have native apps at 30%, progressive web apps at 25%, and hybrid apps at 20. I think this is going to be probably 25%, 35%, 30% by the end of 2024. Web apps at 25%. I think this is also going to go up to 30, 35%. Native apps, I think we're going to see a little bit of a drop, by the way, in 2024 to maybe 25%, maybe 20. I've noticed the hybrid app market is really coming strong in 2024 and towards the end of 2023. Okay, so here's let's give some kind of considerations to look at while you're trying to decide what development path you want to take. And I want to simply, when I'm comparing the options, I want to do a quick market analysis with the following considerations. What is the audience? What's the project scope? Look at budget and resources, time to market, and what's your long-term strategy? And it doesn't mean, and by long-term strategy, I don't mean that I want to start you in the same place I want you to end up. It's not about getting a foot up. For me, it's dependent on how you're going to bootstrap fund your project. How are you going to grow your user base? What are they expecting? Is it an early adopter market where you can get away with some things that you wouldn't in a more mature market? What is that strategy going to be based off of exactly those things we discussed? And for me, the biggest consideration is going to be the technology options at the time of development, the target audience, look at their behaviors and preferences, look at the scope of the project. Is it naturally very complex, which leads me to think maybe I should go to either starting with an easier solution or to a more native experience? Do you have a budget in the first place and resources to build a good web presence and to build a native app? Or do you have the marketing budget to launch that native app to get it enough eyeballs to take over the market share that you could? And look at what it's going to be when it comes to time to market. Time to market can be complex, and you sometimes have a lot of time to play with this, or sometimes you have to catch the moment and make sure you take some market share when things are in flux. So just in the end, I want to thank you for coming. Notice that choosing the right development path is going to be a critical step for your success in your web or mobile app platform, and it's going to affect your strategy for how you move forward, how you get funding, and how you bring in users. By conducting a thorough market analysis, you're going to have a better idea of what's going to be the key criteria and segments to help you make these informed decisions and maximize your project's potential inside those timelines that you're looking at. So make sure you know your goals and what you're trying to achieve specifically in those stages in the next stage. Know your turning points and your inflection points. Stay tuned for our next video, guys, where we're going to discuss the implementation phase of your development journey. And I'm super excited to talk more about how you guys can build your apps and become successful.